Chrono Trigger. This game is a beloved classic, and for very good reason. It captures the essence of Final Fantasy, in my opinion. To a degree, the essence of Final Fantasy, and works it in with time travel in a way that your decisions do somewhat show results later on. And it can get also very thought provoking. It's also an early example of a game with multiple endings. But what is the story of Chrono Trigger? You open up playing Chrono, spelled Chrono. It is the day of the Millennial Fair. Celebrate the kingdom being around for 1,000 years. So Chrono goes to the fair, takes part in little challenges. Also there to support your friend Luca, who with her father is debuting a new invention, like a teleporter. And before we go to that, we end up running into a young lady who we know as Marley. This is not her real name. She's actually as we learn, the princess of the kingdom. She wants to see things, but, her father, a widower, wants to keep an eye on her, keep her safe. Something I can relate to more this time I played it than I did the previous time I played through the game. And in the course of, also making some decisions and all that, here's what happens. When we go to see the machine, Marley is willing to try it, and her pendant reacts with the teleporter and opens a gate in time. Of course, Chrono and Luca sort of join and jump in after, Luca being responsible. Chrono had agreeing to escort her around. And they go back to the year 600 AD, where kingdom is under attack by the fiend lord Magus and his troops. And it just so happens the queen has gone missing. Or at least it appeared she'd gone missing, but they found her. They didn't find her. They confused her with Marley, which in turn causes Marley to cease to exist. This means we must go rescue the queen at a nearby cathedral. We also gain some help temporarily from a figure known only as Frog, because he looks like a frog. Of course, we rescue the queen, we restore Marley. Return to the present. Chrono is arrested for abducting the princess. Chrono faces trial where, depending on choices you make, you are either declared innocent or guilty. Regardless of which, the Chancellor is dead set on having you executed. Of course, Marley and Luca come to rescue Chrono, and again, something happens that they get transported through time again. Not to the past. More or less to the... I think it was not to the past right away this time, but to the future. But this is also start where we see that as we travel through time and space, we learn that there is a lot. I mean, we travel to a future where we learn about a drastic event known as the Day of Lavos. And that humanity has pretty much lost hope. So, we take what we've learned. We learn that the Fiend Lord Magus wanted to summon Lavos. So, we have to travel back to the year 600. But find out after making a new friend named Robo that our attempt to travel through time with 4 people in our group caused us to jump to the end of time. We also learn that our characters can use magic. In fact, 5 of the possible 7 characters you can play as can use magic. Chrono gets lightning, or thunder. Marley gets water. Luca gets fire. Robo gets none, because he's robotic. He is not magical. Yet he uses magic points when he uses his special abilities. Go figure. Well, now they travel back in time to the time of the Fiend Lord and work their way to fighting him, getting the sword Masamune in the process, as well as recruiting Frog, who we find out was actually a friend of the knight that went to fight him, to fight Magus. Well, as we work our way through and finally get to the Fiend Lord's Keep, we must stop him before he can unleash monsters. And this is where we have an epic battle, but Lavos does not get summoned. It now leads to basically some changes in the present. But because of the failure to summon Lavos, everybody gets shot through time again. Our team manages to fall all the way to prehistoric times, where humans are not necessarily the dominant species, sort of coincide with a humanoid reptilian race called the Reptites. Of course, this is actually we go there. I think before. No, no. I think yeah, we go. Actually, go back there at first because we need a certain item. That's when we meet another character, Aya. Ayla. And of course, first have our encounter with the humans and the reptites. Of course, then we go back to. That's when we go back to fight Magus. But then in the fight with Magus, we get shot back in time again. In fact, to the very specific moment. A deciding factor between the reptites and the humans. And at the time, there's this red star in the sky. Turns out this red star is actually falling out of the sky and basically impacts right on the reptite castle, their home. Of course, Ayla is willing to remember the reptites for, they fought with, they fought. They proved their worth. They lost. But they won't be necessarily forgotten. It's also at this time that we learn how Lavos came about. Lavos was not of our world. It came from space. Well, not of the world. It came from space. Its name actually comes from Ayla's people. Lavos, big fire. So now they have more questions. And they have to find answers and figure things out. What caused this to happen? Or how did things change? And we end up traveling many years to a point before the Common Era in the game to an ancient kingdom, the Kingdom of Zeal, where a figure has been there, a prophet. We learn about Queen of Zeal and her fascination with Lavos, making a machine to harness Lavos. She's gone off the deep end. About the only sane individuals, it seems, in her family are her daughter, who is sort of being forced to help her, that's Shala, and her son, or the queen's son, Janus. Prophet is seemingly moving things along with very accurate predictions. As we learn, the prophet is Magus, who is an older Janus. And he's not been trying to summon Lavos to harness the power of Lavos. He's been trying to summon Lavos so he could destroy Lavos. Of course, after the events, we have to, quote, have to find a new way to get to the point in time where the Kingdom of Zeal is. Get up there and, solve things. which we jump through time in that using the time gauge to find out there was a device being made. And that the three sages that disappeared from the Kingdom of Zeal have been scattered through time. The weaponsmith has ended up in time when, at least partially in the time of the Fiend Lord. Another one sort of got shot to the into. One was imprisoned on Mount Woe. Was the one that also was back on Earth on the world. He's also invented a time machine. Of course, when he exists in his point in the future, I believe, or one of them exists in the future, at least. And of course, the other one's at the end of time. So once we get the time machine and we travel back to the antiquity area, as they call it in the game, Age of Antiquity, we try to reach Zeal to stop her from doing this madness, unfortunately arriving too late, because now everything is in the Ocean Palace, which has become the Black Omen, and has transcended time and space, and harnessed Lavos. Now, of course, before you go after the Black Omen, you can settle some side quests, which will bring closure for some characters. Also, in your choices, you can choose to enlist Magus because you find out you actually have a common goal: beating and stopping Lavos. We also learn that in the process, Lavos was a being, a, almost like a parasitic life form. They travel from planet to planet, eating up the resources, eating up the basics of the planet, before having spawn and sending the spawn out to do the same damn thing, before they also move on to do it to another world. Now, of course, during the process, as Chrono goes to, during a battle triggered by Queen Zeal, we have a fight that no one can survive, but Chrono makes the ultimate sacrifice to save the others. It's also about this point that if you chose to, it's also about this point that you could choose to enlist Magus in your group. And Magus comes already with powers. In fact, he has the shadow element, and you can have Frog learn water magic. And Ayla does not get anything because she existed before magic. So here is your team that you can pick members from, and actually taking some changes, some some responses. We can get closure on getting very powerful armor, and sealing a bit of a rift between the king and Marley. Luca can prevent a tragedy from befalling someone in her family, one that she was unable to prevent because she was little at the time. Frog can put his friend's soul finally to rest. You can restore a forest. You can raid the Reptite Castle in the present. you can actually improve the fates for even the beings that followed the Fiend Lord. Before you go to the Black Omen, work your way through the Black Omen, and finally fighting Queen Zeal, and then Lavos themselves. And the fight with Lavos technically is a three-stage battle. Of course, once you defeat the first part, you do have a chance to travel through time and up your characters if you wish. Or you could take on Lavos. The team you'll use, you should utilize the best of your abilities and pay attention to certain things. Because each form has a different thing to work with. And many of the bosses, of course, once you defeat Lavos, everybody somewhat gets a happy ending. Magus continues his search for his sister because he knows she isn't dead. Luca begins making starts making a robot because she's kind of aware that because they stopped Lavos, the future will have changed. Chrono and Marley marry. Uh, Ayla gets married to Herbo and is able to start the royal line because Ayla is the ancient ancestor of Marley. And as things work out, everybody's getting a happy ending of sorts. Luca finds actually a baby, leaving us on a cliffhanger about that, so to speak. But, it's where things work out. Now, this game was also designed with different endings depending on when you chose to tackle Lavos. And if you take certain characters all the way to the end, I mean, you want to revive Chrono, the only way you can revive Chrono is to replace him with a replica of him, so you need to have won a duplicate doll from something in the fair. It's a little tricky. You don't have to have Magus join you, but that's a decision you make with Frog at a certain point, if you choose to fight him or not. You don't have to sort out all those details. And of course, the ending of the game all is reflected by when you do take on that final fight. And each of these fights, they have some very clever tricks imposed into them. Like with one boss, if you fight them but don't take out their hands, well, as long as they have their both hands available, they can perform this devastating attack. So, what's your best way to get them out of the game? Get rid of them and save your characters? You take out one of those hands. In some, you have what looks like three opponents, but only one is the one you really need to focus on. In fact, even the final battle with Lavos is like that. You have what looks like your main foe and two side bits, but one of those bits is the actual Lavos that you must destroy. But it protects itself, so it can only really be hurt when it's resurrecting one of its other parts. this game gives you a lot to think about. And works as its own standalone title. Now, it did get a sequel, which I will hopefully play at some point. A sequel called Chrono Cross. And yes, Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross are linked. I've heard so much about it over the years. But in the end, when you have to, and you can develop your characters any way you like. I mean, they all have amazing abilities that they can unlock with the more time you devote to leveling them up. Each character has their own unique attacks, only can use certain types of weapons. Each character has also they have dual attacks, which they can use with a second character. The sole exception being Magus, because he is sort of an character you don't necessarily have to have in your game to complete. And sometimes you have these you have these twin techniques or dual techniques that can actually do a lot of good. And they also have a triple attack which can be used by certain characters, which can and the higher the attack, the more damage it can do, which is of course always brilliant. But it was definitely designed with a good deal of replay value to it. Traveling through time, traveling through, well, can't say through space. And all throughout this, you sort of gain a respect for these realms. In the age of antiquity, yes, the magic users lived above in the floating land. And the non-magic users lived on the surface, which was in a bit of an ice age. In the medieval era, 600 AD, Middle Ages or something, we have a war going on between the magic users and the non-magic users. Of course, in our time, it's at peace, but what we do in the past can change that. And of course, you have this grim future which came about because of the day of Lavos, when Lavos finally, rose and burst through the surface, leaving the world in a terrible state. But everything you do in the process of saving the world, and even with some philosophical concepts. Like maybe these time gates opened up because the planet is dying, and it's the planet's way of, you know, its life passing before its eyes, which in turn allows humans to this ragtag group to go through time and save things. You see that, there is a timeline and a family that lasts through all these ages. It starts with Ayla, descends down to next time we see it as the king and queen in the Middle Age timeline area, to the king and of course Nadia in the present time of the game, 1000, and even to an old man in the bleak future. And just by eliminating, just because of Ayla, because of what Marley did in the past, she ended up wiping herself out. And this was even wasn't by her choice. It just happened that way. So it handles that in a very nice way. And of course, because our characters have now stepped outside of time, they aren't necessarily affected by the changes that happen farther down the road. This all makes it a beautiful game with beautiful music, and this game has seen a few ports since its original release. I mean, it got released on PlayStation after its Super Nintendo release, years after its Super Nintendo release. In the around 2011, it got a port to the DS with things to help work with the dual screen system and the touch screen. That's actually when I finally got a chance to play through it, even though I had like a strategy guide for it long beforehand. But Chrono Trigger is a very good story, very thought-provoking story, and I would definitely recommend playing it. If you want to be a completionist, yes, you're going to love playing through, trying to pick the right points when to, go to that battle with Lavos to see about getting all the different endings. And I'm not going to tell you what all the different ones are. You've either read about it by now, or if you haven't, you can experience them. And that's all I'm really going to say about Chrono Trigger. I hope you've enjoyed my little, you know, going on about it. And until next time, take care and have fun. Bye.